This week's episode of The Unstarving Musician is brought to you by the Morning Tempo podcast, another podcast in which yours truly attempts to explore the intersection between business and creativity. This week, the podcast is featuring a best of episode with author Angie K. Love. She published her first novel when we spoke for the podcast last year, and she recently released a sequel called Awakening Souls, A Tale of Love Recovered. You can hear the Morning Tempo podcast with Angie K. Love and me on Apple Podcasts and at morningtempo.com. And before we get rolling with this week's episode, I wanted to let you know, in case you didn't hear in last week's episode, about a new music video that I recently completed. It's for a song I co-wrote with Peter Rand and released last year. The song is called New Gods Part 2. It was mixed and mastered by my good friend Chris Responti. Both of those guys have been on the podcast, Peter Rand and Chris Responti. And the music video is on my brand new artist YouTube channel. So if you like it, if you like my music, after you visit and hear that song, please subscribe. They say that kind of thing really helps with getting a little traction on YouTube. I will place a link in the show notes for you, of course. Other than that, it's the eve of Independence Day here in Mexico. The wife and I are going to celebrate with a couple of dear local Mexican friends, and yeah, we're looking forward to it. Okay, with that, let's do this show. This is the Unstarving Musician podcast, and I am your host, Rabanzo. On the podcast, I have conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals to discuss business, marketing, the creative process, and a lot more. It is all designed to help you indie music artists do more of what you love. Make music. My guest for this episode is Ryan Dusick. Ryan is the founding drummer of Maroon 5. He's an associate marriage and family therapist and author of Harder to Breathe, a memoir of making Maroon 5, losing it all, and finding recovery, which was came out this year, comes out this year in November, right? It's not even out, is it, Ryan?
Not yet. It's coming soon.
Yeah. In 94, Ryan Dusick joined friends Adam Levine, Jesse Carmichael, and Mickey Madden, whom he met at Frenchwood's Festival of the Performing Arts to form the band Kara's Flowers, released an album with them called The Fourth World in 97, and following the termination of their record deal, the band went on hiatus. Everyone went their own ways, but in 2001, Dusick reunited with Levine and company. This time, they were joined by former Square guitarist James Valentine. The group changed their name to Maroon 5 and set to work writing new songs that owned a fresh groove-based element dissimilar from their previous songs, with tracks mostly inspired by Levine's failed relationships. I love that. And you guys scored a great record deal. The band scored several hit singles. At the 47th Grammy Awards in 2005, you won Best New Artist. The next year, they won a Grammy Award for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with vocal for a live version of This Love. Over a decade after his departure from Maroon 5, Ryan is releasing an intimate behind-the-scenes look at his journey from the highs and international superstardom to the depths of addiction, anxiety, chronic injury, and depression. His book, Harder to Breathe, chronicles Ryan's remarkable recovery and his transition from the music industry to professional counseling, where he's helped hundreds of clients overcome mental and physical health challenges. Ryan is a one-of-a-kind success story and wholly dedicated to sharing the message that recovery is not only achievable, but life after addiction can yield incredible results. You can find Ryan, by the way, lest we forget to mention, on Instagram at Ryan_Michael_Dusick, which is D-U-S-I-C-K. Great name, by the way. I'll put a link in the show notes. Ryan, welcome to the Unstarving Musician.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All that was good then, yeah? Accurate-ish?
Yeah, that was pretty spot on. Thanks.
I listened, by the way, I didn't know much about the, I'll be honest about you. I knew about Maroon 5. Since music got digitalized and I guess I got old, which I think happens to a lot of us, I sort of lost the love of like finding out who every member of my favorite bands or who, worked on my favorite albums. And the Maroon 5 album was among those. My wife absolutely loved it. But I didn't know about the record you had done before. With Kara's Flowers. I like it. I saw on your Instagram that you were enjoying it again, probably after some time, and thinking, hey, that wasn't bad.
Yeah, it was, it feels like another lifetime looking back on that now, but it was such an innocent time, and we were teenagers and just so full of so much excitement and enthusiasm, thinking we're going to go out and become the next Beatles, And listening to it now, I just hear like so much joyful, youthful energy.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm looking forward to listening to the rest of it. I listened to a song and then saw you were enjoying it somewhat recently anyway, and I thought I got to listen to that, and I'll have to have my wife hear it as well. So I gathered, and I didn't know a lot about Maroon 5 other than you had a great album, and I saw Adam, of course, was everywhere after a while, but I was reading that you guys had toured constantly and learned that you had an arm injury from all that playing and stopped in 2004. It made me think a little bit of a biography I recently read of Phil Collins, who kind of wrecked his health. Maybe if you know of his biography, you see some similar things that occurred to you. But what happened at that time? What was the physical nature of the injury?
Well, yeah, it was very physical. Looking back now, knowing everything that I know that it was more complicated than that, though. It was a mind-body connection thing as well as a physical thing. So I kind of touch on that in the book. But at the time, I had an old pitching injury in my shoulder, my right shoulder. I was, the high school team, and yeah, I ended up, quitting baseball at a certain point just because I couldn't overcome that injury. And it was something that never really bothered me playing the drums until we were touring for a few years straight, nonstop. And it just became, just the whole lifestyle was really like wearing on my whole constitution. And then it started to hurt my shoulder, and then it started to become a whole arm thing. And then it really got sort of confounding because it became a coordination issue. I was playing through the pain for a long time, and I think the nerves, got affected by the inflammation in the shoulder. I was diagnosed with something called thoracic outlet syndrome, which is kind of like carpal tunnel of the whole arm. At really, long story short, at a certain point, I just lost the ability to coordinate playing the drums the way that I used to. So that's really why it kind of went down the way that it did. It felt very, very physical at the time, but it was also very much a psychological, emotional, spiritual kind of breakdown.
How so?
Well, looking back, I realize now I didn't understand it as a teenager or as a young man. We didn't talk about mental health the way that we do now, at least in the common space. Looking back now, I understand I always had anxiety. I was always an anxious person. I think I was kind of tightly wound and very perfectionistic, a little obsessive compulsive. I never really thought of it as stage fright because I was always just really excited to be on stage and performing. But when it got to the level that we were having to perform night after night and really no downtime, even when you were behind the scenes, we were doing meet and greets and we were doing photo shoots and video shoots and interviews and, one thing after another. Is just for my personality, kind of more of an introvert, needing my own space. It just started to wear on me over time. And I think that the anxiety started to manifest physically more and more. Early on in touring, even back in '97 when we did the first album, I didn't understand it as such at all. But I started having stomach problems. I started having like a weird feeling in my throat, and my sort of obsessive compulsive behavior started ramping up on the road. I was very meticulous with my drum set and tuning and positioning. Sound check would kind of wear on, and I would wear myself out. Just positioning drums and tuning them over and over again. So, but fast forward to 2003-4, when we've been on the road for 2-3 years straight, all of that behavior became more and more intense. And I just found myself really, really having to try harder and harder to try to execute what I was doing, as opposed to it becoming more and more second nature. It was getting harder and harder for me to perform until it really reached a level that physically and mentally I was just not really capable of going out there and doing the job.
Hearing the story is reminding me of Taylor Hawkins.
Yeah.
And only from the little bit have read about what was going on with him prior to his final, well, maybe for months and months, actually, some of the pressures that he was feeling.
Yeah.
And your story doesn't sound incredibly dissimilar, maybe coming from different angles, but that was a lot. I read here, I made note that you had issues, and I don't know if these all, or if it's like a constant life management with all of them, but I read anxiety, depression, perfectionism, obsessive compulsiveness, and then alcoholism.
Yeah.
And you mentioned just about every one of those in that response there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to imagine. I mean, it does look like a lifetime. It probably does feel like a lifetime ago, but at the same time, when I think about when that album was out, it doesn't seem like that long ago. And it's funny that we haven't been talking more about these issues and as openly. But of course, we weren't doing this kind of thing at that time, and social media wasn't a thing. When did just really jumping fast forward, when did the marriage and family therapy practice or the idea of doing it begin to evolve?
Well, it was really kind of a moment in my life of inspiration that led to that. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned alcoholism and depression after I left the band. I mean, that was devastating. You can imagine, we'd worked for a decade to get to where we were. And then I had to walk away from it right at the peak as we were becoming, global stars. And that was just devastating. I was depressed to a level I had never experienced before. I started drinking more heavily. And it really took me, I mean, over the course of about a decade, really to really to hit rock bottom, essentially in terms of just spiritually feeling really just disconnected from life. And when I quit drinking in 2016, it started a journey that I couldn't have foreseen when I started it, because I was just trying to be healthier. I was just trying to, get back to being a happier person and living a life that was contented. But what it led to was a discovery of some talents I didn't know I had, and things that I found fulfilling that I didn't realize would be. Being of service early on in recovery was really impactful to me, meaningful, gave me a sense of purpose. And I was volunteering at a recovery center for a couple of years, just going there and sharing my story and giving people encouragement and support and all that. But I started getting some really good feedback, like, you're really good at this. Have you ever thought about doing this professionally, that kind of thing? And I really hadn't. But just the thought of that for the first time in a while gave me a feeling like, wow, I have something to offer, maybe other than just, the fact that I was in Maroon 5 at one point. And it just inspired me. I was motivated again for the first time in a while to apply myself in a way that was a little different. But just like, I don't know, I just one day I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for grad school and see if I get in. And I got into the clinical psychology program at Pepperdine. And a month later, I was there sitting in class and studying psychology and, all this stuff. And a few years later, I'm a therapist. And it's really just, a life journey. I like I said, I couldn't have anticipated, but it's been in some ways even more meaningful and more fulfilling than the success that we had. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't trade any of the things that we did in the band. That was a magical time in my life. Leading up to that, and very fortunate for the success that we had. But this is another level, because I'm in my 40s now, and I feel like I'm doing something that's helping people, and it just means a lot to me to be able to give back and to give of what I've learned on my journey.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm struck that Pepperdine is not something that's peppered into your bio rap sheet. I'm like, they should put that in there. And
sure.
I want to back up. I'll feel remiss or I would be remiss not asking about this a little bit. Going back to our initial discussion on your injury, in retrospect, you mentioned that you had a sports injury prior, I assume much prior to the touring and all that. But in retrospect, do you think that there were lifestyle things or regimen sort of things that you could have known had you had that in your toolkit to be able to maintain the physicality that you needed to continue going, assuming that you weren't dealing with a lot of other things that were contributing to all of this? And I ask because I know it's a thing, physical injury for a lot of musicians and maybe drummers in particular. I would assume drummers in particular. Yeah, and so in retrospect, are there things maybe were you able to do them differently would have prolonged the physicality of your career?
Oh, yeah, of course. It was hard for me for a long time not to look back with regrets about the things that I could have done differently, or I could have planned for in terms of the lifestyle of performing on tour and everything. But, I was young. I knew what I knew, and I didn't know any more than that. But I think that, first off, I was a self-taught drummer. I never took lessons. And in some ways that benefited me, I think, just in that I think it gave me a unique style. I kind of stumbled onto something and I just was 100% playing by inspiration and feel, and just looking at the drummers that I really loved and emulating them. Um, so I think that was something that helped the band in some ways, but the fact that I never learned the rudiments, I never really learned proper stick technique. It never even dawned on me that the reason for that is not just to play proficiently, it's to not injure yourself. Because if you have proper technique, you're utilizing the levers properly. You're not, immune to injury, but you're much less likely, to hurt yourself if you're doing it the right way. So I look back, I wish that I had taken lessons. I wish that somewhere along the line I had been, maybe open to the idea of being more teachable. As a young man, you're 18 years old signing your first record deal. It's like probably had a little bit of defensiveness about people telling me what to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I regret that too. Just I wish I had been more less defensive, more open to suggestion. But it wasn't until we got out on the road and even opening for artists, playing a half-hour set, it wasn't really an issue. But when all of a sudden we jumped up to headlining and we're playing an hour and a half every night, really intense sets, and I really had just learned how to play. I started playing in the late 80s as a kid, when it was like Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses, and the style was just flailing about, with your arms above your head and your hi-hat at your, chin. And so that was just not conducive to the kind of shoulder health that I probably. It was a tough transition for me because we started playing this groove-based music, which was something I was really into, but I kind of felt like I was just doing a hack impression of it because I had come from that rock background. So I felt a little bit restrained and kind of trying to control things and just keep a steady groove. Anyway, to answer your question, yeah, there was a lot that I probably could have learned and applied in terms of being prepared for performing in that way.
Sure. Well, as a self-taught drummer myself, I would have never guessed that you were not a school drummer when I listened to those recordings. So kudos for all the work and leveraging of the inspiration that you did to get the sound that you did. And for those who probably won't see the video for this, because I seldom ever publish anything from the video portion. It looks like you still play drums. You've got a nice collection of snare drums behind you, some percussion, a drum kit set up, a guitar on the wall. So tell me, you are still playing? It looks like. To what extent are you doing so?
Yeah, I continue to wake up and frustrate myself with the drums on a daily basis. No, drums is a part of me. Music is a part of me. It's not to the degree that it once was, but it's something that I'll always enjoy and I'll always make time for. And in some ways, I feel like I'm still in the middle of my journey in terms of getting hopefully back to playing to a level that I feel comfortable with. And that's still just a part of where I'm at in my life. But I built this studio at a point. It's funny, timing wise, I built it at a time in my life when I was really at a crossroads, and I was planning to continue to write and record and produce more, which I'd done a little bit of. I produced a couple indie records and things, and I wanted this to be a home base for creativity and recording. I actually went into rehab. Like, I think the first week I was in rehab was the week that we broke ground on this structure. So it was kind of like interesting timing. What had been me running myself into the ground. I stepped in here the first time, and it was a fresh space to just have fun, just to explore music again, sober, and then it became my office, to study and to I became a therapist. Really, during the pandemic, I was doing Zoom sessions from here. So it became a lot more than just a recording space. It's kind of, like I said, it's a man cave of sorts, but it's an office, and it's just a place for me. This is kind of like my home space, my peace, and a safe space.
Yeah. May I ask, in the drumming that you do you, well, when you typically sit on the drum kit, what are you playing, or what are you playing to, or is it creative stuff? Meaning, do you have time where you just sit down and try and do completely new things, or are you playing to things that inspired you or continue to inspire you? What does it look like? What does it sound like?
It varies. I've been trying to just simplify it down to just really getting back to the basics of trying to just groove along to a record. I'll put on headphones and just kind of, it changes. I mean, I'll go to my initial inspiration and I'll go put on the old R&B or soul records or rock records or whatever and just kind of rock out. But I'm trying to stay up to date, on what's going on in music. It's hard as you get into middle age, but I'll put on just like the pop mix, or I'll put on something, whatever's going on, and just kind of listen to what the grooves sound like these days and try to play along to it. Yeah, I think more than anything, I'm trying to make it fun for myself, because I think for a long time I was like thinking I got to get back to the way it was. I would practice, songs about Jane and play along to it, and just like I got to play like that again. It's like that's kind of meaningless now. It's like that's the past. It's something I'm proud of, but my relationship with music, I want to be just fun and joyous at this point in my life, not pressure.
Sure. On recovery, if we may talk about that, it looks like I don't know if it was from your from the book table of contents or the intro or some other third-party source that I had read. It looks like you did the 12-step program.
Sure.
For recovery. Are you still pretty active with that, or can you talk about it and what it means to you now and how it helped you, what you maybe throw out for other people when you meet them, people who might struggle?
Yeah, well, the 12-step program is wonderful. First off, it's something that is available to everyone. It's free. I mean, you can pay $1, whatever, as just a token when you're there or not. And it's really just a self-help group, so really a wonderful space for people that are trying to get sober and stay sober and pass that on, in terms of paying it forward. I believe in the 12 steps. I also believe it's not the only way. For me, it was one of many ways. It was a very powerful force in my life in terms of finding a spiritual center and finding, just a path to walk in terms of being of service and showing up in the way that I want to in life. I needed more than just that. That wasn't the only thing I did. I kind of took a holistic approach to recovery. And that's why I think it was so meaningful beyond just staying sober. It was, it's been about total mental health and spiritual health and physical health, everything all together, mind, body, and spirit. But, for the 12 steps, the wonderful thing about it is the first step is acceptance, right? Humbling yourself, surrendering, finding acceptance. And I think that in and of itself is the most important first step of any journey of recovery. You have to kind of be able to let down your defenses, stop thinking that you have all the answers necessarily. Sometimes it's just surrendering and accepting where you're at and what challenges you. And maybe there's a better way than all of the ways in which you've been running around trying to fix it yourself. And, the rest of the steps just kind of take you through a journey of taking self-inventory, making amends, being of service, just so it's really a roadmap for recovery that I think is wonderful and great for most people that are in recovery. But I think there's a lot of other ways too to get to the same end. It's just it's pretty convenient because you don't have to pay anything for it.
Sure. What a public service. What are some of the other? You mentioned it's one way, not the only way. What are some of the other things that you integrated into your life and your recovery that you might share with others that could be helpful?
Well, the recovery center that I volunteered at was called the Matrix Institute on Addictions, and it was not 12-step based. The 12 steps were encouraged, but it was based in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, was really the nature of the program, but also kind of the neuroscientific approach to understanding the brain and addiction and how addiction affects the brain. So we kind of gave a layman's terms, explanation of what addiction looks like in your brain. We didn't go into the deep, neuroscience of it, but just kind of understanding the parts of the brain and how it affects it and what you're working against when you're trying to get sober and stay sober. And then CBT is just an approach. It's, it's pretty basic therapy at this point in terms of changing the thoughts that surround your addiction. They have this model that's trigger, thought, craving, use. So there's something that triggers you, it leads to a thought, that thought leads to a craving, and that craving leads to use. So once you get to craving, it's probably too late, you're going to use. So the idea is identifying triggers, identifying the thoughts that get triggered, and then being able to change or replace that thought with something that's more productive. Because we have so many things that are just automatic thoughts, especially when you're stuck in that loop, whether it be addiction or any other kind of mental health challenge. oftentimes we're just stuck in a repetitive loop of an automatic thought that drives our anxiety or depression, So it's finding ways to kind of short circuit that whole path and shift it into a way that's going to be more productive for you. So that's one. I mean, there's a lot. Mindfulness has been another big, huge thing for me. I'm still learning and expanding my understanding of being mindful on a daily basis and using that to be centered and balanced. And so, yeah, I mean, there's just so many different aspects of mental health. The thing is that addiction is the manifestation of underlying issues, right? It's a coping mechanism. It's a way to try to escape or to try to manage uncomfortable feelings. And once you remove that, there's a whole lot of uncomfortable stuff underneath there that starts coming up. So that's really just the beginning of the journey, right? Is getting the substance out of the way. So really everyone is on a journey of mental health recovery when they're trying to get sober. That's just the first step. And then staying sober becomes a path of learning more about yourself and working on those underlying issues.
Sure. There've been a lot of things I guess I've read, and I was just suddenly thinking of a really old movie called Arthur with Dudley Moore, and in which he's a raging alcoholic, and when he does finally stop drinking, there's this clarity that he gets talked about in the movie. Like, wow, I can see things I couldn't see before, and I'm sure a lot of that was introspective vision, and then of course things he was possibly missing. Are you still working on some of the other things that are mentioned in your book that are more, I guess, emotionally connected? Some of those things that misfire or whatever they do. Do you still have to spend a lot of time on that, or did much of that clear up with some of the other things that you're doing, or just suddenly become way more manageable?
Yeah, I mean, it became way more manageable. Really, at the end of my drinking, I was a mess, I mean, not just in terms of the drinking, but like I was pretty much agoraphobic. I had panic attacks almost daily. Just the ability to function in any normal way was greatly diminished. So it's night and day. I mean, you wouldn't recognize me 10 years ago. The person talk. I mean, the fact that I'm not anxious right now, is a miracle to me and something I'm grateful for every day. So yes, it's extremely different. However, we're all a work in progress, right? I mean, there's always challenges at every step of the way. I'm venturing into a whole new life. I've been a therapist for a while now. I wrote a book. It's coming out. That brings a whole new set of challenges that I have to remind myself, okay, the perfectionism will come up. The obsessive compulsiveness will come up. I'm sure that there will be situations in which my anxiety becomes an issue again for me. The difference is that now I have tools to work through it. I have a lot of inspiration and reason to feel optimistic even when things are challenging. I look at challenges as opportunities to grow, as opposed to in the past, there were things to run away from and avoid, like the plague,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's a process, it'll never be over. I'm constantly in a process of hopefully growing. Some days it's 2 steps backwards, and then hopefully the next day it's 3 steps forward. So look, I'm still challenged in a lot of the same ways, but I do feel actually probably like I'm in a better place now than I've ever been.
You seem so well adjusted.
I hope so. I'm teaching this stuff.
So speaking of the book, I wanted to ask how it has been working with Ben Bella Books, and how did that relationship begin, and how long has it been going on?
Yeah, it's been great working with Ben Bella. That came about, I guess, at the start of this year. Or no, wait, it was the end of last year, I guess. I started writing the book right at the start of the pandemic. It's something that I had thought about doing maybe for a decade, but I didn't really know what the purpose of it was, other than the fact that I had a story to tell. I just didn't know what the point was really, or I didn't have the inspiration to write it until I was in grad school and really doing all this work on myself. And it just started coming out of me. It was something I couldn't even really avoid. It was just like, I would wake up in the morning and I was like, oh, I have another paragraph. So I just started writing anyway. So I finished the first draft. I worked on a little bit with an editor, and then I wrote the second draft. And I was really proud of that, and was able to get an agent who brought it to some publishers. And we had a few options, which was really great. But Ben Bella really stood out to me because they have a very author-centric approach. They're really invested in me, and that was something I obviously was looking at. favorably. And then their marketing plan and stuff like that, they're very modern in terms of their approach, and just seemed like it was going to be very user friendly for me doing this for the first time. And the people were just so friendly and really helpful. So yeah, my experience has been wonderful since, I guess, the end of last year, working on the final edits, working on, everything. There's so much more that goes into a book than you think. The writing of it is intense, but then when you're done with that, there's like a year of, everything else, and pulling photos together and getting the album cover, the book cover together, and just all of the stuff that leads up to releasing a book. It's been really a wonderful process, and Ben Bella's been great.
Well, the nice folks at Ben Bella Books sent me a digital copy, and do I have it right? It does officially come out in November, or is it out?
It comes out officially November 15th.
Okay, but you can buy it like on a what do they call it? Pre-sale?
Yeah, today you can pre-order it, and over the next few months, we'll just hopefully be getting some more media and stuff attached to it. So we'll see.
I've always shared my experience with writing a book and talking to other authors. It's like, okay, you're done writing, now the work begins.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Yeah, well, I am going to read it. I enjoy the musician biography. I have this feeling that yours is going to end on a more positive note than most that I have read. I mean, some of them are frankly, very sad, but they're very interesting at the same time. So I'm looking forward to reading. I was perusing the table of contents and started reading the prologue, and I was like, oh, this is great, because it appears that the chapters are sort of themed as what was going on in music when you got started, and then very aptly themed for things that were happening to you for good reasons. So I'm looking forward to reading it, and I'm sure it's going to be great, and obviously it's going to be very dependent on all the hard work that you're getting ready to do to make it, a big seller. But I want to be conscious of your time. We're running a little past. I did want to mention or talk about one more thing, if you have a couple of minutes.
Sure. I'm good.
Tell me if this is accurate, because as they say, you can't believe everything you read on the internet, but I saw on IMDb that you did some acting.
That's weird. You're the second person this week to ask me that. No.
It's funny. I'm going to look at it again. You should look your name up on IMDb then. So we won't go there, but I definitely saw some sort of connection with the Maroon 5 drummer there. I'm like, wow, I guess that's him. That's funny. They don't mention that in the bio either.
Well, I think probably we were fortunate enough to have our songs placed in a lot of movies and TV shows.
I bet you that's, well, let me ask you this then. Sorry to interrupt. Was one of the movies Love Actually?
Yes, we had, I think the song Sweetest Goodbye was featured in Love Actually.
Yeah, there are a couple of others mentioned here. I'm sure that's what it is, and I'm sure if I go really study that listing, it might be a little more clear to me that your music was featured in those movies.
Right.
You weren't an actor. I think I go on IMDb and I just immediately assume if I see someone's name there, acting.
All right. Well, we did do one performance on Beverly Hills 90210, the original series, okay. The Peach Pit After Dark. I think that's the only show that we appeared on, but yeah, I actually was on screen playing the drums at the Peach Pit After Dark in 1997. So that I don't know if you call that acting, but I was acting like a drummer.
That's great. Well, that was pre-Maroon 5?
That was Cars Flowers.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to listening to that. I'm looking forward to reading your book. I wish you massive success. Again, at Ryan_Michael_Dusick, Dusick, link in the show notes, kids, for everything about Ryan, and we'll have links to the pre-orders for the book in the episode too. Hey, it was a real pleasure speaking with you. I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. This episode was powered by Bandzoogle, the platform for musicians and bands to build a great website, manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle features great design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, and tickets, and so much more. Try it free at bandzoogle.com and use the promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. And I'll put a link to all that in the show notes, of course. If you love what I do, if you find value in what I do here on the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor or the show notes for this episode to learn about options for offering your support. The Unstarving Musician accepts direct financial support, and we very much appreciate it, but there are several other ways to support the podcast and help keep it going. Again, you can learn more about those options for supporting the Unstarving Musician podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor. Please help others find the Unstarving Musician podcast by following or subscribing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help. And if you have feedback, please go to unstarvingmusician.com to get all my contact info. You can text me, call me, email me, leave a voice message right there on that page. Just go down to the bottom of the page and you'll find everything you need to know. I really would love to hear any of your comments, suggestions, questions, whatever you've got. And you can find links to just about everything talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. All right, I'm peacing out. Thank you for listening and sharing with your musician friends and fellow indie music fans. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.